Hello Treacle, how you doing? My name's Paul, it's Plan Z, and we're about to do a settings video. Treacle, cause you're sweet. Right, what we've got here is we've got a Recti stack amp that we're going to be diving into a second. We've got it in low gain, let's go to the back pickup, low gain, medium gain, high gain. I did a little sound check video yesterday and I've tweaked it since then. This is slightly different. I didn't like what I put out yesterday. So this is going to the medium gain. We're going to split it into stereo. I've got control over the left rights as per the jam yesterday. I'm going to show you in this video how I assign all of that. We've got the wets. I was going to do a little jam and I was going to do this bit and stick it at the end of the video, but I've done the video already and I thought, you know what, I probably better show you what's coming up in the settings, because you might sit there in settings and go, oh bollocks, I didn't want to know all that. Don't like the sound of it. But so that's what it sounds like. Let's get into it. Boom. Right guys, our first view today is going to be this view. I want to explain to you the overview and then dive into the patch, into the full settings. But before we do, we're going to get sidetracked quickly with when James Hetfield famously uses a rectifier with a JC120. So what I've done is I've set up another patch that's got a rectifier and a JC120 in it, but I wanted to show you my shimmer because it turned out good, I think. Yeah, I'm loving my results there. I've not heard shimmer from a Boss GT1000 YouTube video that doesn't sound really kind of thin and nasty in the high-end frequencies. I can almost hear choral voices in mine. That sounds really nice. So I'm going to do a settings video on that at a separate point, but for the minute what we really want to listen to is this. This is the rectifier in the medium gain with the mids pulled back. This is that patch. What's going on here is if I hit this button when it's blue, that's low gain. That changes the amp settings to medium gain and changes the EQ settings to the amp and volume settings. We're going to look at how I assign that in this video. So that's the medium, and then when I hit this button here, that's the high gain. I'm now going to go back pickup. Okay, now a little accident happened along the way. So if I take this down to, so now we're in, when both of these are blue, I'm in the low gain settings on the back pickup. Now if I go to the high gain here, go to the medium and then back to the low gain. Hang on. So here, this is medium gain using the low gain amp settings. And then I go to that's medium gain with medium gain settings, and then down to low amp with low amp settings. I don't know if you got how that worked. It will become clear in the assign. So basically got 4 gain stages, and it becomes more obvious in the lower gain amps. With the rectifier, everything's distortion. So, but we'll talk about that when we get into the tweed. So there's what's happening with the amp changes. Now here, I'm able to split that into stereo left right. I'm going to cover the assigns for that. So when that's red, that splits me into back again. So that changes the divider at the front end and the mixer at the back end. And then here, when I hit this button, I'm in the right ear, and when it goes green, I'm in the left ear. And if I want to get back to the middle, I just double tap the middle. There. Okay, and how that works is I've got another patch here that does exactly the same thing, but I'm only using 1 amp and it goes between wet, dry. So there's my amp. This is completely wet channel. This is the amp without the effects. This is now the amp with the effects engaged. Okay, if I disengage the effects there, I can do the same thing with this, where I turn into double, hit that, come back to the middle. They've got slightly different ways of being assigned. I still haven't figured out what I did. It was very late at night when I did it, and I wanted to get this video out so I can move on to the other amps, get them set up in similar ways. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go into this, the first patch. We're going to look at the low, medium, high gain settings and then how to set this up. I'll try to run through the signal chain of the amp first and then go into how I assign everything. See you in there. Okay, now we're in. I'm going to stay on the back pickup. We hit a noise gate in the HX effects and we hit a compressor. And then when we come into the GT1000, I've got my my first EQ block. So I just need to adjust the microphone slightly. And what happens here is I'm dealing mostly with the lows and low mids, and I'm boosting some of the mids. So we're going to have a quick look at that. We're going to turn it on and off and things like this in a minute. So here you can see I'm cutting the 31K completely. Sorry, the 31 Hertz. I'm down to about -6 on the 63 Hertz, coming up to 0 on 125 because I'm actually doing a cut here at 125 Hertz, you'll see. Cut a little bit at 250 because I'm boosting the resonance of the amp, and then I'm cutting 500 Hertz. And then when we come along to the next page, you'll see I'm boosting a touch of 1K, 2K, leaving 4K alone. I deal with this. This is an interesting frequency we're going to look at in a minute. I cut a little bit of the 6K and I cut all of the 16K because I don't want any of that going into my amp at all. That's where a lot of the fizz is coming from. So that's what I've done there on this amp. I've got this engaged, but I'm not actually using it. It's a feedbacker. And then we hit the first divide, and this is where the wet dry thing happens. So when I hit that, the effects, what happens is it engages that channel and doesn't touch the main amp. But that disengaged for the minute. We're going to go into the A channel, which is where the amp is. We're going to go, before we dive into the amp, we're going to have a quick look at the EQ. Now what I've done here is I've done a post little -1 here on the low gain, and I've pushed the overall level by 1 to compensate for the changes I made inside. Now the changes I made inside are very slight. We're going to start with a high-low cut. I'm cutting at 8K and 125 Hertz in the low end. That's quite high, but as you can hear, it sounds fat. Now, this 4K is sitting in the middle of a trouble area for me. A lot of people bang on about cutting the 6.5K Hertz, but I don't find the problem area to be that on this unit. So what we're going to do is going to boost 4K. Yeah, nasty. And we're going to scan around. 5, it chills off. 6, it starts going away. 8 is almost gone. No effect. We come back in. 5, we start to feel it again. Nasty. Nasty. I don't like these. And then we're down into the mids. Now the mids always feel uncomfortable when pushed like that on a high Q. But what I do here is I find that, sorry, let me just boost that again, put it on a tight Q. Going to come back up there from the 5. Just scrolling into the 4. The 4 is the middle point of this, and that. If you can hear it, if you're in headphones, good headphones, you'll hear this. That is a trouble area. So what I do is I open up the Q just a touch to take a bit of the 4 and 3 and 5, and I pull it back to -3. Okay. And then I do the same thing at 2.5 Hertz. Now I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to boost this, and that frequency there. See, I like this. I want that, but I don't necessarily want this. And I find this in a lot of patches. I want to take some of this 3.5 and a little bit of that 2.5. So what I do is I just have it on. You know, the tightest Q is 16. I just take it to the next one, which is 8. And I take that and I just pull it back, and depending on the amp, I pull it back by 2 to 3. And that does that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just take off these 2 EQs and then discuss with you what I did with the microphones before we get into the amp. So here, these microphones. So this is what this amp sounds like now I've taken my EQs off. We're on the back pickup. I'm going to go to the medium gain. Now the high gain. Booming. So I'm going to come back down to the low gain. Now the microphones. I'm using the 412s to give it the girth. Some good advice from South Africa. And although generally speaking, I tend to use 212s on a lot of the amps. The Twins, the Tweeds, the Voxes. I've used 212s on that. But with this, to give it the girth, I've used the 4. And I've used the 421. Why have I used the 421? I can use either, but I prefer the mid push that comes from there, and there's a little less high-end activity to be managed. I set the microphone right up against the front of the cab, but I'm pulling it 3 centimeters away from the center, so just off center from the cone. We've got 100% of the mic coming through and none of the direct mix. And then in the next speaker, to complement the 421, I'm using the 87 also on the 412s. But I run the mic in the center to get the most highs into it, because it's good at really catching low end. And I position it in the same place, so right up against the front. Again, 100% of the mic level coming through, and in the next page, none of the direct mix. But what we're going to do now is we're going to manage that low end by sticking this first EQ on. And what happens is that I'm looking at my volume meter. It now feels crisper, but not crispy enough, and there's still a little bit high-end energy there that I want to get rid of. So here's where my other EQ is. So let's engage that. And all of a sudden, those highs that were doing my head in have gone, and I feel like I've still got enough crispiness in my amp. Again, we're on the low gain setting, so let's now look in the amp. Actually, before we look in the amp, I'll talk to you about what happens when this splits quickly. This other EQ here. Now, remember, when this splits, it's like it's going off to the separate mics. You've got the 87 on one side, the 421 on the other. So I've dropped a little bit of the lows out of this because it's quite low heavy when I put the 412s in, but I'm pushing the highs a little bit because obviously it's a low focused amp, but I'm pushing different EQs to give the separation. So here I'm taking out some of the 315 because that was giving me a rumble in the low end when I split the channel out on that mic. And rather than dealing with the 4K and the 2.5, which are a problem on the 57 and the 421, on the 87, I can just take a shallow scoop out of, say, the 315 or somewhere around 4. Just take a little bit out of there, but somewhere in a different place to where I've done here in the first EQ to help my spread. And my cuts are different. The low cut is the same, but the high cut I've brought all the way down to 6.5. Just so I've got less energy to manage, make it sound tighter. We don't need that energy. So, but I want it on my main amp. Okay, so now we're back in the low gain. The gain, resonance, and sag are set the same for each, the high, the low, and the medium gain. I found. If I scroll through, you'll see none of those change. The only setting that changes slightly will be the volume, which the low gain is 85, and it drops to 83 through the medium and high gain. Okay, just to pull it back a little bit. Now that's because when it changes, right, so we're in the low gain setting at the moment. You see the bass is 35, the mids are 35, the treble is 57, and the presence is at 90. Now, if you are using your resonance with your presence, You balance the two out to get your highs and lows together. You can drop your bass and get all that boominess out of your mix and get this to crispen up a little bit is what I found. So because I'm managing the highs here, those nasty frequencies that we spoke about, and my selection of mic is helping me with this as well. The 57 gives you some nasty frequencies to manage. Like you only use that in a live environment. Some, obviously they use it in recording studios, but if you had a choice, really, you'd use a condenser and a ribbon. I don't know why there isn't a ribbon mic in this. Yeah, and the 421. The 421s are brilliant. But anyway, so when I now change, so watch what happens here. The only thing to change is the mids, the treble, and the master volume. So here, when I go to the medium and high gain settings, the treble drops by 3 to 55, but I push the mids to 40, which is only a little bit, but it's just to give it a bit more cut through. And because I'm pushing the mids just a little bit, I bring back the level here just by a couple of cents, and that's why that volume level changes there, okay? So that is the amp settings. Now then, whilst we've got the amp here, let's see what happens if we leave everything in the middle. Sounds really flat. I'm still on the back pickup. Sounds really thick, but sounds really flat. And without my EQ on it, it would, be rumbling all over the place. I keep the sag at 0 to keep it fast and attacking. What I'm going to do is we're just going to have, let's go back here. Yep, we're just going back to how it was set a minute ago. Yeah, that's more in your face, isn't it? The highs are there. So what we're going to do is going to come out of this, no, we're not. We're going to stay here, and I'm going to show you now how this assign works. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go into the first set of assigns, which is the amp. What happens on my bank up and bank down buttons? They're handling the amp change. So we hit the menu button, we hit control assign, and first we're going to look at this first page in here. Now I normally empty this and save it for when I have an emergency or a simple assign to make. So if you want to make some simple assigns, like just turn a compressor on and off or a distortion on and off, use it. Now here I had a little emergency where I had to put divider 2 channel select in there on the control 2 button to help me get one of the assigns finished. But in here you actually, generally speaking, can't make very complex. It's usually more limited, the types of assigns you can make, which is why I normally empty everything in there and do it all in here in the assigns. Now I'm going to go all the way to the end here. This is going to be a bit of a pickle. It's a bit of a pickle because it happened organically, and I started out with 2 amps and it became 3 amps, and then it became the left-right thing. So we're going to focus on this here first and see what happens per button per change. So in the first bank down, which is where I changed from high to low gain, so low gain to middle gain is happening on the bank down, and on the bank up is where it goes from middle to high. Now when I've changed from low to middle, and high, I've needed to change the volume, which happens here, and you can assign that in here. So you just press the button and you can scroll through here, through all of these, and there's so many more parameters here for you to be specific about. You can tap into here and then into this subdivision and get really, it's very boss. Okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to go back to preamp 1. Oh, I can't remember what setting I was meant to be doing now. What am I doing? Preamp 1. Let's just come out of there. I'm just going to come out of there, go back in. Do you know what? It's too late at night to be doing this. Leave it as it was. Oh, the level. Yeah, so adjust the level. And you go through like that. So let's just look at bank down. So you can see it's mostly amp parameters that will change. So the treble and presence needed to change. No, the presence didn't need to change. So I've got a spare assign there. I could move that assign that's in the other page into here now, and keep it clean and tidy. The middles, they needed to change a little bit. You can see the bass needed to change here a little bit, but the resonance remained the same. So what I did is I've saved it for another assign. So let's look at what those assigns are. The next assign along is what happens with my bank up, which is, we say, just changes the amp change from medium to high. There. Now, the next assign is my control 1. Now, control 1 is what changes me from being here to there. And you need to attack here. Your mixer needs to go from stereo to pan left right. And pan left right is when you're in the full stereo field there. And then let's look for, in here we're going to find another control 1. Control 1. Control 1, I had to drop the EQ level. So what happens here is when it's in the middle, the EQ is as I have it set, as I explained to you. But when I went to the stereo left right, I had to pull the EQ back by a cent because it was just too overpowering. So I've made that adjustment in here as well, assigning that to the control 1, you can see, and there it's controlled for both EQs, the left and the right EQ. Remember, there's 2 there. The other thing to happen is at the front end, you've got the divider. Divider needs to go from single to double. So when it's off, it's single, and when it's double, it's like that. But double doesn't sound like double if you don't change the mixer. Remember, I changed the mixer back here. Yeah? Okay. So the next thing to happen is the left-right, and that is assigned to the control number 2. So let's look for control number 2 button. Oh, before I forget, the other assign to change while the amp changes on the first control, my bank down, is the wet channel amp needs to change between medium and high, and the volume for that. The rest of the settings I leave the same. But yeah, the wet amp is also covered in these assigns in that change. Now let's just have a little look here. What we're looking for? We're looking for control number 2. Control 2, you can see here the mixer is going left, right, and left, right, and that's because both times I hit it, I want the audio to be in the side in either left or right. Yeah, if it goes from stereo to left, right, it'll just put you back up the middle. But we're going to come out of here and into the other control page, which are also assigns, but this is where my divider is telling me to go from A or B, because in here you can't make mixer assigns like you can in the assign page, but you can make the divide change here, but you can't. Yeah, there's certain, yeah, it lets you do the channel select, but you really can't get much deeper than that. Okay, whereas on the other page you can get deeper. All right, so yeah, when I hit my control 2, that then puts me, it selects here that it's going to the channel B, and then in the other page, in this assign, the mixer is selecting that the mixer is in the left right mode both times that I hit it, because when I hit the button the second time it moves me to the left side, which is channel A. And what that looks like in the divide we're talking about is this one here, and that's the mixer for it. And you can see, if you look at the parameters here, when I hit control 1, it goes from single to dual, but I'm in stereo. And if I hit it, I go back up the middle. And what happens there is when that goes from single to dual, this changes from stereo to left right. But here, when I make the control 2 assign, this, I'm going to hit it first time, it changes to left right. Second time, it remains in left right. It doesn't change back to stereo until I hit my control 1 button twice, which puts me back in the middle. And what happens at this end when I hit the control 2 button, this is very complicated to explain. I hope you're following this. I hope you're brighter than I am. It goes from single here, remember, then it goes left, right, B, and then I hit it again, it remains in left, right here, it goes to A, and then I hit my control 1, it goes to dual, I hit it a second time and I'm back in single. So what that looks like is from single, I hit the Control 2 to take me to the right. I hit Control 2 again to take me to the left. And then either double hit Control 1, takes me stereo, back to mono, or if I just wanted to go back to stereo, I just hit it once. So I've got a couple of ways of getting around it, and I do it differently in the two different patches. I'm yet to decide where to go. It's a template. Yeah, I think I covered the assigns there. I think I've covered the EQ. I think I covered the speakers, and I covered the amp. I think I covered it. Let's what we're going to do is wait a second.